Hi, in this session we're going to be thinking a little bit about the gospel and culture, how we proclaim the good news of Jesus to the different groups of people in our communities. Just take a moment to think about those different groups. Maybe you want to divide them by age, those that are children and young people, those that are young families, maybe those that are a bit older, that are baby boomers, they've just retired, maybe a bit early, 55 to 70s, and then those that are older again. There's all kinds of different groups divided by age. Maybe you want to divide them by other interests. In our communities, we've got a whole load of people of different ages that are really into New Age spirituality. We've got another group of people around here who they don't work. The media has labelled them the benefits culture. There are others who work out of town with professional jobs. They don't spend a lot of time living in these communities, but they do sleep around here. These are the places that they call home. And there's still others that have retired. They've maybe got a bit more freedom over how they choose to spend their time. Still busy people, still with lots going on. There's all kinds of different ways to divide up our community into different groups. The question I've got is, are we reaching all of those different groups effectively with the gospel of Christ? One of the best ways to, if you like, test that is to look around our church and see who is and isn't represented amongst us. Maybe it's significant that in an area where primarily there are people who are white, middle class baby boomers, those 55 to 70 in age, they're the ones that are represented most in our church as well. But maybe there are groups that are underrepresented, those that are working class on benefits, those that are from different backgrounds, maybe those who have explored Christianity but maybe got a background in New Age spirituality. Where are those people amongst us? Are we being effective in sharing the good news about Jesus with them? And the next question is, well, who needs to change? Do we need to change so that we can take the good news to them, or are we expecting them to change so that they can receive the good news from us and how we are church at the moment? This isn't a new question, it's not a new problem. Back in the Bible, this was as much of an issue as it is today. There's a passage in Acts chapter 17 where Paul is waiting for Silas and Timothy to join him, and he's in Athens on his missionary journeys. Here's what he says, verse 16. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to dispute with him. Some of them asked, "What's this babbler trying to say to us?" Others remarked, "He seems to be advocating foreign gods." They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you're presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we want to know what they mean." All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas and trends. Paul then stood up in a meeting of the Areopagus and said, "Men of Athens, I see in every way that you are very religious. For I was walking about this city and looked carefully at your objects of worship. When I did, I found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' Now what you worship as something unknown, I am going to proclaim to you." Paul found himself in a different culture than he was used to. These people were not from a church background. The church back in Jerusalem that was primarily full of Jews that had converted to Christianity would have been vastly different to anything like the culture in Athens. What Paul did was not try to present the message of good news that would have worked in Jerusalem in Athens and expect that to work. Instead, he got to know the people of that city, their culture, their background, where they were from. And then he presented exactly the same message of Christ crucified and resurrected, the good news gospel, to those people, but in a different way. using images and symbols that they did understand and were familiar with? Are we trying to present that good news to people of different cultures in our community in ways that they simply can't relate to? It makes perfect sense to us with our backgrounds, but it makes no sense whatsoever to them. Who needs to change? Is it us? Or is it them? That's something I'd like you to consider prayerfully now, together and as individuals. How can we as a church reach with the good news those groups in our communities that we clearly are not yet effectively reaching with the love and compassion of Jesus and the news that they can have their sins forgiven and start a new life with Him? I want to finish with this, a quote from this book. It's called Christianity Rediscovered, written by a missionary called Vincent Donovan. It's a great book. It talks about a missionary that went to the Maasai in Kenya and tried to present the gospel to them in all the same ways that he had in Europe. Strangely enough, it confused them. It made no sense to them whatsoever at all. The conclusion of the book is that Vincent Donovan had to spend time living in that culture, understanding it, and then presenting the gospel using images and messages that that culture understood. The same gospel presented in an utterly different way than he had presented it in Europe. I want to read just one quote from this book to you, which sums up what I'm trying to say about this gospel and culture message. In working with people of different cultures, do not try to call them back to where they were. Do not try to call them to where you are, as beautiful as that place might seem to you. You must instead have the courage to go with them to a place that neither you nor they have ever been before. Do we have the courage to go with people who are so different to ourselves to a place that we are not familiar with for the sake of the gospel of Christ?